Welcome to the Movement Cafe. We are so glad that you are here. There are going to be a lot of opportunities for us to sort of share and talk together about some big global things, but also about how that interacts with us locally. What does that look like locally? How do you take this big work of the church and make it part of your work of the church? And we're already doing that, right? Because our work, right, goes up, and the concerns of the people in of faith doing this work in the world bubbles up to become to bring attention to the things that are most important. And we're seeing that play out in the space of COP right now, as there's ongoing negotiations about how we're going to do this together as a fossil phase out, right? There's that push, let's phase this out, but also the sense of like how each congregation is working on that, right? It's like an echo, and we're doing this together in different spheres. We're also going to talk a little bit about World Council of Churches, which is, of course, a really big topic as well, but they have been as well participating in sharing about COP, being present as a faith presence, and they have their Decade of Climate Action from the local and to the local. So this sort of circle of conversation. And we're doing all that today. So I'm Reverend Brashenda Fairhurst. I'm in Southern Oregon. I encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know uh, about yourself, who you are, what things are sort of inspiring you in your world right now. They don't have to be creation justice related, because remember, every single thing you're doing right now is happening here on planet Earth as part of the creation. We have this weird separation in our mind that these things are over there and creation work is over here, and it's all the same work. So I serve as an advisor to the PNW and Oregon Idaho Conference teams. I work with the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement in a number of capacities, with great joy and hope. I love this organization. And speaking of the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kathy, who's going to share a little bit more about the movement. Go ahead, Kathy.
Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to see you all joining in, and to see people from near and far on this screen today. My name is Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt. I'm a United Methodist layperson, a commissioned Global Ministries Earthkeeper. I'm in the Minnesota Annual Conference, and I'm one of many leaders who helped bring the creation justice movement into being. It really is part of a long tradition, long heritage of our denomination that we are affirming a vocation of creation justice. It calls all of us to live out our lives in finding a just relationship with God's good creation. And yet, as we've seen more and more concerns about climate change, about environmental injustices, biodiversity loss, we have that call has risen more loudly in many of our lives, that we need to do more, not just in the world, but in our denomination. And so we've met at different conferences, at Earthkeeper trainings, in our local churches or conferences, and now increasingly online as we've been meeting. And we keep asking a simple but profound question of what more might we do together as people of faith, as a church, as a denomination. And so that question comes into all of these conversations and is here today. We've had a number of different committees and work teams established. We've had a lot of communications efforts. One of the keys is this conversation that we have once a month, this Movement Cafe. We're really glad you can join us today at this one, where we're going to take a bigger look at really all of our global connections. We are a global denomination, and issues like climate change are very much global. And so at this moment, when COP30 is underway in Brazil, we are thrilled to be able to focus on that and to bring some United Methodists who are both connecting to COP30 this year, as well as some who have been part of the World Council of Churches and that decade of climate action that has just been declared. We're really thrilled to deepen our connections through this cafe and in our conversations, and hope that it inspires you to take action at your local level, conference level, at whatever level makes sense for you. So at this point, I think we have everyone on who will be presenting, and I'm going to turn it back to you, Rashinda.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So, yes, we have this crazy, wonderful thing called the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. And we tend to think of that as just huge. So we're lumping you all already in it. So consider yourself part of the movement. And the if you have any questions or anything like that, always just please follow up and ask. What I want to do is I want to start by introducing Reverend Dr. Becca Edwards. And so she's been actually on the ground at COP this and more and more there is more virtual observing over the years. It's shifted, right? A big push during the pandemic to do that. And the virtual observing is quite complex, which I'll let those folks share with you. Becca has, though, had a chance to just be on the ground again this year. She is United Methodist Climate and Energy Fellow working with the General Board of Church and Society. She is responsible for federal legislative and policy advocacy in support of climate and energy policy, and she serves as an observer to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, negotiating as part of the General Board of Church and Societies delegation. And her whole Kathy's going to probably drop her whole bio in there with the link so you can learn more about her and read more about her. And at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Becca.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be with you, and thank you for your interest in United Methodist Climate Action. This is exciting to see this big crowd. Well, yes, I just returned from Belém, Brazil, late on Monday evening, which is where COP30 is being held. And so COP is the Conference of the Parties. It's the annual gathering of the parties to the original Framework Climate Convention. And so this is a really exciting COP because it's actually the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. And so that is one theme that kind of came up a lot during the proceedings. So one of the things that was a little bit unique about this year's COP was this focus on what we called the new multilateralism. So multilateral negotiation process just means that there's many different parties all negotiating together. And so in the COP process, the parties all work together to come up with consensus on a document or decision or that sort of thing. And in the past, there is opportunity for every voice to be heard. But what often happens in this space, like other spaces, is that countries with more influence due to their size or resources tend to dominate the negotiations. And so there was a lot of emphasis this year on what's called the new multilateralism. And it's sort of the idea is that there will be more voices at the table, more voices with an opportunity to influence the process, more diverse voices. I know I was at one session where the first voice that was allowed to speak was a woman from the Global South, and she offered a very powerful and stirring call to climate action and described the way her country is affected by climate impacts. And it really set the tone of urgency for the rest of the session. So that was one thing that was a little bit different, and it came up again and again. And perhaps that comes from another thing that was different about this year's COP is that in the months prior to COP, there was an international effort to solicit ethical and moral feedback on climate change called the Global Ethical Stocktake. So it's very UN kind of language, but a stock take is just an effort to sort of see where we're at on in this case, ethics of climate change. And so they had these 5 questions. For example, if we know what we need to do, why do we not do it, right? And so they had opportunities for people to gather and ask these questions of each other all around the world, and they solicited input to a large stock take process. And this was really fascinating, especially as a faith-based advocate, to see. I mean, if just the language of that question I don't know if you hear the echoes of our confession of sin liturgy in that, but I definitely do. So it really set a different tone for this year's gathering. and put an emphasis on the spiritual, ethical foundations of this crisis that I think made for a better conversation. Because what's true is that we have the science and the technology that we need to solve this problem. And what we're lacking is the collective will to move forward. So two really interesting new things that happened this year that stood out to me. And I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about the connection between this large kind of nebulous international gathering to what's going on in our local churches. So I know most of y'all are here because you're interested in climate, but I know a lot of people in our local churches don't necessarily make that connection between the work that we're already doing and the work of our international climate negotiation space. But the thing I like to tell people is that the work that our churches are engaged in now is deeply connected and rooted in climate change. Climate change causes like international conflicts that cause migration and suffering and food insecurity, all sorts of things. My church, for example, has a really robust feeding ministry. And so in Texas, that means that we as a church have to care about extreme heat and access to air conditioning. And that is something that's made worse by climate change. So I would encourage you, I only have a couple of minutes here, so I can't get into every single example, but just to think creatively. Climate touches a lot of different justice areas. I kind of call it the justice area that connects all the other justice areas. So if your church is involved in food security or immigration or worker rights or overseas missions to people in the global south, especially, all of these areas are touched by climate change. So it's important that we all understand the way climate change is affecting people around the world, making their lives more difficult. And as people who love our neighbors all around the world and want them to have a safe environment where they can thrive, then we should all be caring about climate change too. So I will turn it back over to you, Rashinda.
Wonderful. So yes, wow, what a great overview. We sometimes think about just the fossil fuel piece, right? And there's, my goodness, fossil fuels have their fingers in every pie they can possibly get a hold of that might make them some money. And that means that that conversation has to be enormous, and really, really appreciate you're breaking that down for us, Becca, just like even like this is your local church. If you have a food pantry, this impacts you. You know, if you're dealing with heat, this impacts you, and really, really appreciate that. The second person we have to share with us, so again, staying with this big picture, as Becca was speaking to COP specifically, I am just thrilled that Ann Jacob is here, and she is going to speak a little bit towards the World Council of Churches. Again, this just giant sort of stratospheric entity, but absolutely on the ground as well. So Ann Jacob is a United Methodist pastor. She served in Edmonds, Washington for 4 years. And the ministries there included refugee welcome and resettlement. She interned at the United Methodist Global Board of Church and Society and is currently a member of the World Council of Churches Central Committee, which is a big deal. She's currently a JD candidate at the University of Washington School of Law, and I'm just going to turn it over to her. Her voice is just, I'm just so pleased that she's here. So Ann, if you want to go ahead, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rashinda. And thank you all for making time this morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are. I will, I think, start with a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer that has grounded some of our WCC work around climate justice. And this quote has been attributed to Dietrich. If I sit next to a madman as he drives a car into a group of innocent bystanders, I can't, as a Christian, simply wait for the catastrophe, then comfort the wounded and bury the dead. I must try to wrestle the steering wheel out of the hands of the driver. So that quote by Dietrich Bonhoeffer has grounded much of the work within the WCC programmatic committee that deals with children and climate justice. And I think it's a really appropriate framing for how I kind of offer what we're doing in the World Council of Churches. For those of you who aren't familiar, the World Council of Churches is an organization that was started in the 20th century that really grew in the aftermath of World War II, when there was a real sense for a desire of ecumenism and unity. The Methodists are actually like founding members of the World Council of Churches, and historically have given a lot to the leadership in terms of general secretaries and staff members. It continues to be one of the biggest funders. We contribute a lot of our money to the World Council of Churches, even while we make space for a lot of other voices to be heard. And so in terms of United Methodist leadership, in terms of staffing, it's not quite as it was in the 20th century, but it's a very intentional choice to say there are many voices in our ecumenical movement that we want to uplift. And I will just say, as a Methodist, it's been really poignant to me that given ecumenism and the work and how often male dominated it is, the Council of Bishops made a choice to send 2 women as the Methodist representatives. And that, to me, every time I go to a meeting, I don't lose sight of that that is an important marker of how we as Methodists show up in that space. The World Council of Churches has, I don't know most recent numbers, but the most recent time I looked, it was like 183, 185 member churches. At every meeting we have, there's a representative from the Pope, a very large Orthodox contingent. And so everyone from the Lutherans to the Episcopalians, the Anglicans are there around the table. And so our most recent meeting was in June in South Africa, and we adopted this resolution to declare the ecumenical decade of climate action justice, which meant that not only were we as individual churches saying we really want to prioritize climate justice, we really want to prioritize caring for our communities that are Indigenous and otherwise particularly impacted, but we want to care for the next 7 generations, and that means caring for our creation. And so that was adopted in June, and since then, there has been just like a flurry of activity at the World Council of Churches. There's an incredible guidebook that'll be coming out shortly that gives what's called intergenerational justice a real focus. There's an incredible WCC staff person named Frederick Siddell, and she does a lot of work with attorneys around the world. And I want to emphasize that because it's such a unique aspect to climate justice that didn't really occur to me until she told me about it. And I'm not sure many of you might be or may not be, but there is this movement among young people around the world in climate litigation. And so they are bringing lawsuits. Actually, one of the key ones is in Montana, and they won that lawsuit at a state level, where they have brought claims saying that their future is forever changed based on the actions of our current governments and elected officials and the, frankly, inaction that has been taken around climate action. And so that climate litigation is something that's being pursued internationally. And the Montana case study is one that has been used. And so there are law firms that the WCC assists in preparing, because there are attorneys who work within WCC that are helping do this intergenerational work in order to protect the climate, but also kind of emphasize that regulations that have been passed need to be adhered to. And so that's part of the work. The other part of the work is really empowering communities that are either forgotten or at risk. So there's a lot of work in the Pacific where there are a lot of Indigenous communities and island nations that are particularly impacted by growing seasons and monsoon seasons and flooding. And so there's been great work towards having churches being empowered in that, and also developing what's called an economy of life. And so making sure that the way that we generate money and work and labor is actually aligned with climate principles of how we care for creation. And so I will say I'm very excited about this decade because I think when individual denominations do work in kind of silos and not kind of together, we can kind of create the wheel multiple times. And so, from my vantage point, I think it's wonderful that we can kind of cross-pollinate and have a kind of targeted practice at saying, hey, this the Methodists and the Lutherans have it, let's replicate it. Or wow, the Roman Catholics are doing an amazing thing. Let's partner with them. And so having an ecumenical decade, I think, will actually put a lot of power behind it. And I think in terms of there are many countries around the world in which religious leaders and political leaders are one and the same or very related. And so to have an ecumenical decade in certain parts of the world means maybe far more than we can imagine in an American context, where having the WCC say, hey, climate justice is one of our main priorities, means that each of those countries will also then prioritize that work. And so anyway, I just want to say that I will drop in the chat a link to, unless someone oh, you all maybe already have. I think maybe you did. Somebody did. Kathy, thank you, Kathy. Wonderful. So there in the chat there are links to WCC's work and specifically the latest on the climate justice work. So you can find more there, but I'm happy to answer questions if you have any. I think someone said, when did the decade begin? It began in June. It began very recently, just a couple months ago.
And I hope it's okay if I ask you this. So you mentioned, I live in Oregon, so our Children's Trust has been, in our purview for a while here, those of us working on climate. When Governor Brown signed the signature climate law in Oregon, she did so surrounded by young people who all wore t-shirts saying how old they would be in 12 years, which was the ticking clock that we're all looking at. I know you went into law school. You're in law school right now. Is that did that inspire you? I don't know if you want to share that at all, or I know you're just the kind of work you're doing in the range you're in. What is your hope around that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I went to divinity school. I went to Yale Divinity School, and I was recruited out to the West Coast. I'm from Philadelphia. I'm from Eastern Pennsylvania Annual Conference. And I was recruited out to the Pacific Northwest, and I served 4 years at Edmonds UMC, which is a really wonderful community. And it was during Trump's first presidency, and that was a really challenging time. And we were doing a lot of work with refugees and undocumented folks. And Washington State has one of the largest private detention centers in Tacoma. And it continues to operate despite the fact that maybe one day it'll close per legislation that they adopted a couple years ago. But there's still people there, and we got 28 of them out, mostly queer kids, mostly parents with young children who they were separated from them. And after getting 28 out, we were working with these pro bono attorneys, and I kept asking, what do you need? Do you need money? Do you need housing? We have those things. We can give you more money, and more of our congregants can house these folks. And they said, no, we need more hours. We need like human power. We need more attorneys. And I was like, gosh, I don't know what to put in this column. I mean, I can fill out forms all day, but I just don't know what to do. And so I decided to go retool to learn the skill set of, well, how to fill out those forms and get people out, because it costs $800 to post bond, and it costs my own hours, which is pro bono, right, to fill out those forms. And so to me, it was a question of, how do I get 1,600 people out? And I couldn't go to bed. And I could pray all day and I could preach all day, and my entire congregation was going to say amen and yes, we agree. But fundamentally, we just needed more hours. And so that was what really energized me to go to law school. In terms of climate litigation, I think it is incredibly inspiring. Because fundamentally what we're saying is capitalism is benefiting from the backs of each of us and from our future generations. And it doesn't care as long as it's making a profit. It is completely putting profit over people. And so from my vantage point, I would love to help with climate litigation. That's something that would inspire me. but the reason I went to law school was not the climate litigation. It was definitely the people who were incarcerated for no crime except entry.
Thank you. That testimony is, oh my goodness. So you're trying to wrestle the steering wheel away from the person who is, and sometimes I know this sounds a little weird, but sometimes companies need that legislation because they have made commitments to board members. They can be sued themselves for not being greedy enough, and so they actually need those guardrails too in order to have that as a backdrop. So think of it that way. It doesn't have to be this.
Yeah,
We can find places of alignment.
absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to shift us again, and both Anne and Becca have done this wonderful job of talking about how this is on the ground, right? This is where your feet are, where you serve. This is what is happening, and we're also working together with these bigger organizations, global interests, global concerns. And I'm going to shift it over to Audra and Jacob Stone, who are also living in that space a little more locally. They're going to speak to that context a little bit more. And Audra and so Pastor Audra Hudson Stone and Jacob Stone are the co-conveners of the Environmental Justice Task Force of the Michigan Conference of the United Methodist Church and the North Central Jurisdiction Network of the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. Shout out to those coordinators. There's quite a few here today. In November 2023, they served as young adult representatives of the UMC in the 2023 World Council of Churches Eco School, focused on faith-based responses to climate change and environmental degradation. So Audra has studied public ministry and ecological regeneration at Garrett Evangelical, and Jacob serves as the caretaker in his conference, and so much more. Audra also works with the Wesley Foundation. So again, you can check the full bio, but I want to have them share with you rather than me just go on. So I'm going to turn it over to Audra and Jacob.
Thank you, Rashinda, and also thank you, Becca and Anne, for sharing more of what is happening, both with the COP and the WCC. I, for one, am so grateful to hear these stories and to learn more of the larger networks doing the good work to help our planet. It also resonates with me because until 2023, I wasn't even aware of the existence of the World Council of Churches. I know it kind of sounds a little crazy that I spent my entire life in the Methodist Church. I'm a pastor's son and an annual conference fanboy, and friends with all sorts of Methodists throughout our state and in their leadership in our conference here. But my scope of knowledge of the church at work started and ended mostly with what was happening with Methodists in Michigan. But that did change in the early months of 2023 when, because of another one of Audra's roles as our conference secretary for global ministry, we hosted Joyeva Bohol, who at the time was a United Methodist missionary to the World Council of Churches. She introduced us to the WCC, and particularly their program called the Eco School, a week-long training aimed at young adults in Europe and North America to study together focused on climate justice in 4 areas: climate, water, food, and health. We were introduced to this, applied, and were accepted to attend at the Orthodox Academy of Crete in Greece in November of 2023, about a week away from 2 years to 2 years ago today. And I know we're from Michigan. It was horrible for us to have to spend a week in November sitting on the Mediterranean and miss out on the cold fall of Michigan, but we survived. We had the privilege of being the only United Methodists, as well as the only members from the United States in attendance for this week.
And through this experience, we really had the pleasure and privilege of gathering with young people from around the world, a dozen or more, who are engaged in creation justice work in their local communities. And like Jacob said, the focus of this eco school was really Europe and North America, because there was a intent to have conversations about what it means to be representatives of wealthier communities that have a higher impact in the in environmental degradation and also a higher responsibility to do something about it. So the local communities that were represented really spanned the entirety of North America and Europe. And these communities represented were Canada, Germany, Switzerland, Finland, Sweden, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and of course, Greece, our home country as well, or our host country as well, and the United States, where we were representing. And it was really clear to us throughout our time together that though each of us were experiencing the challenges of living in climate crisis uniquely in our home communities, we all came knowing different unique things happening where we lived. It was also clear that our stories and our experiences were clearly connected. We named these echoes several times of water protection was an issue in many of our places, land sovereignty, environmental injustice, these things all echoed across our home communities, and reminded us in that way of this intimate connection between the local and the global, how we are all connected, even though we have unique expressions of climate injustice happening in our home communities. And this theme emerged over and over again when we visited a local monastery that was engaged in sustainable farming practices and cultural preservation on the island of Crete. We were reminded personally of some of that same work happening in our home communities, about Northern Michigan farming communities that were engaged in the same work. When we learned about the Orthodox Academy's work around preserving endemic species to the island of Crete, some of our friends in attendance from Finland and Sweden were reminded of the same sort of work happening in Arctic regions in their countries. And then again, when we toured solar projects on Crete, our colleagues from Canada were reminded of ongoing efforts for just energy transition, and particularly where they were from in more suburban Ontario, where there was pressure for oil pipelines to be built. So that's all to say that as we engaged kind of in those overarching themes that Jacob named, we also were able to draw these deeper connections between local and global expressions of climate injustice.
Now, we were not only in Greece to learn about our climate predicament, but also, and definitely more importantly, we were challenged to act in our own local context. We were tasked to develop a project plan that we could accomplish in the year following the Eco School. Our project was to create a working group for creation care in the Michigan Conference. The beginning of that project actually began months before we set off to Greece. The Michigan Conference did not have any working group or leadership dedicated to creation care. As we all know, this left a huge gap in our justice ministries. So we began our work to fix that. At our Michigan Annual Conference that May, we began setting the groundwork for beginning what became the Environmental Justice Task Force. We worked with leaders on our conference staff and boards to find the best avenue for our work and got a soft approval to start. So that meant by the time we were in Greece, we had the outline for what we wanted to accomplish. The Eco School gave us even more tools to help create and manage this new endeavor. So fast forwarding to now, we can look back and see how working with the Eco School and the World Council of Churches has empowered us to make an impact at a much smaller level. One example of this is how we communicated our need to care for creation. Audra and I were asked after the Eco School to write for the WCC's Ecumenical Water Network's Lenten study, 7 Weeks for Water, in 2024. We ended up writing the Easter reflection, and for this series, and focused on how environmental degradation is a modern-day crucifixion, and by practicing resurrection through climate justice, we can be a force of active hope in the world. Participating in this study inspired us to develop our own Lenten series for the Michigan Conference, leading up to our Earth Day events that we hosted. We worked with the Michigan Conference communications team to find writers who reflected on creation care in their own context. These writers included camp leaders, campus ministers, local pastors, Indigenous United Methodists, and farmers. And thanks to our conference content editor, James Deaton, this series was recently announced last month as taking third place in the series category of the United Methodist News Annual Awards. This is just one example of how our global networks empowered us to make a difference locally. And that difference even reached further into our denomination than we could have imagined.
Right. So this global to local empowerment is something that has also echoed with our other colleagues in the Eco School. So now, almost like Jacob said, 2 years to the week we spent on Crete, our colleagues have, from that space together, mobilized in a variety of ways for creation justice across their home communities in Europe and North America. So we wanted to highlight a few of the ways our colleagues too have been empowered by this global network right at home. So in Guelph, Ontario, our friend Connor, who represented the United Church of Canada, is now doing organizing work around the intersection of environmental and economic justice. And as a community that feels these increased economic pressures from American tariffs, this is a community that's been very deeply impacted by that, and also by global inflation, which we're all experiencing. There's been, as a result of those pressures, an increased pressure and growing support for oil pipeline investment. So our friend Connor is doing this work around drawing connections between just economic futures and just planetary futures, and really making the case that these directions can be mutually beneficial, and specifically to the community of Guelph. We also have another friend named Joanna who is doing work in Finland, and she's now a candidate for local office. So her experience at the Eco School helped to put her on a trajectory to campaign through the Swedish Youth of Finland to focus on issues of climate injustice and ecological regeneration and sustainable development in her town of Lieto in southwest Finland. So she is doing now work in her local government. And our friend Benza, who is a colleague from Budapest, Hungary, is a local pastor. He kind of came from that perspective in this ecumenical movement and ecumenical youth movement. And since the end of the Eco School, he has begun hosting these justice and liberation cafes in his community and at his church that are focused on a variety of justice themes, including eco-justice. And last year, he also served on a coordinating committee for a Lutheran gathering in Hungary, and specifically around implementing more environmentally sustainable practices in their event, including reducing single-use plastics and introducing food waste composting, and more broadly, integrating eco-justice themes into that event. And finally, several of our Eco School cohort members have really remained actively involved in ecumenical youth movements in Europe and North America. And that movement is particularly strong in Europe. And they've continued to build these connections in the broader region for creation justice. So many of them are still working through the WCC and other denominational movements around creation justice to continue building out their impact in the work of creation justice. So it's really clear in our experience with the WCC and with the Eco School that our larger networks can do this powerful job of resourcing and empowering us to do the work of creation justice in our local communities. And on that same note, these larger networks, we know, also rely on local leadership to do that grassroots work, because that grassroots work is what builds momentum for larger global change, right? These things are interconnected. So while hearing of the larger global work can be kind of intimidating, Jacob shared that he didn't know what the WCC was before. We didn't know really what COP did before that event. So while hearing of that can be kind of intimidating, local and global action are at their best really mutually beneficial. And that's kind of what we wanted to share with you, that they are mutually beneficial. And we have to draw resources and experience and hope really from each other in this broader creation justice movement to build capacity and to build change. And we're really grateful that we could be in this space today to have conversations about just that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Definitely this sense of getting young people involved. So retirees, people wait their whole life so they can retire and volunteer at creation justice work. I make that joke sometimes because there's so few spaces where funders, I hope you're listening to me, where we need to fund staff to do this work, those hours that Anne was talking about, and you can see the good that it does and the importance of how that brings energy together and just the reach, and improves things. So I'd really love to see that work continue to fund the young people working at this, and to really and also to celebrate all the retirees who are like, hey, you're not I'm well, there's a phrase I won't use here, but I don't care if you think I should sit down and be quiet. I'm not going to do that because there's too much at stake right now. So awesome. That's just wonderful. I want to turn now to, so now we've gone sort of all over the map today. So welcome to Planet Earth. And we are going to move now to Reverend Joan Pell is with us, as well as I see Grace, and I think I saw, Mel is here and Nate is here. So we've got at least a few here, but Joan, I'm going to let you sort of start the call here. But we were the United Methodist caretakers, the caretaker gods of creation, and there's one in every annual conference. Sometimes there's two co-leading. We're invited by the Board of Church and Society to serve as official observers at COP this year, which I thought was fantastic. And we have 6 of our caretakers engaged in official observing, in addition to Becca's good work. And so we thought, oh gosh, let's hear from them. Let's hear from a few of them. So Joan is one of those. She also has a wonderful page that she's been keeping updated. Our caretakers have been making blog posts, and not takes a minute to get those up just because they go through channels, but there's already, I think, 4, and there'll be more coming. And so Joan, I want to turn it over to you to share a little bit about what that's like being like virtually on the ground in Belém right now.
Thank you, Rashenda. I'm Joan Pell. I'm retired elder in California and Nevada Annual Conference. I chair our Climate Justice Ministries Task Force, and it fell to me as a result of doing that to be the caretaker, at least at the moment, for our annual conference. I was excited when this opportunity came up to attend COP virtually. I didn't know very much about it, so it was a very steep learning curve in about the 2 weeks warning that we had. Becca asked us each to take a topic. My topic ended up being finance. The others got immigration, food, health, and migration, adaptation, I think it was, mitigation. Finances seem to underpin most of the talks there. And the big decisions won't be made till later this week on that, so we won't know entirely how things come out. But one of the things I noticed was that they have what they call mandated events. Now, first of all, I thought mandated meant everybody's got to go to it. No, mandated events are listening events where the delegates get to listen to different groups. And I've been really impressed looking at some of them, the youth speaking up, women speaking up, Indigenous people speaking up, and the Global South speaking up. And so it's been interesting to hear their stories. I thought it was great what Audra was saying just now about how you could recognize in one place the same problems in another place. Well, that was kind of what's been coming up in these things. People would talk about one thing and then somebody else is talking about something very different in a totally different place and locality. So I know we've seen the protests. You've seen all the Indigenous people outside of the centre, and that's been an important part of things. But as an observer watching, I've kind of seen a lot of. It has felt to me from a distance, and I don't know what it's been like in person, but it has felt to me from a distance that people have really been listened to from the different groups that we might want to hear listened to. So I'm going to pass it over to Nate, maybe, and we'll see what he's got to say.
In Chicago, I cover because I'm a hospital chaplain. As you can see, I am outside of the hospital right now. And yeah, this was a big year for health.
Nate, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Oh, there you are. Okay. You weren't on camera, and I'm not sure, you're breaking up a little bit, so just to give you that
Mhm.
information.
Okay, I appreciate
I
it. Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief since I'm breaking up. For health, they dropped the BLEM Health Action Plan, which is a plan that will inform countries' adaptation plans and national um, contributions that they will put towards those plans. Essentially, just saying that we need to adapt our health systems, so the hospitals that we have everywhere, to prepare for climate change. It's already here. We already see a lot of devastation. A person a minute worldwide dies from heat, and our health systems are already strained. And so they're putting this action plan forward in order to help us adapt to that. A collection of about 40 philanthropies donated $300 million, which, I mean, we're talking IKEA, Rockefeller, Bloomberg, right? 300 million is not a lot. And a lot of these folks, I think, are probably contributing more to the problem than they're helping. But 300 million is something, and it will go towards strengthening our health system. So that's a big change this year. I think it's important. It was important to me as a hospital chaplain. I think something to keep following. So I'll pass it along since I think I'm breaking up. But yeah, glad to be with y'all. I'll pass it to Grace. Pass it to Grace.
Thanks, Nate. I'm going to pass it to Mel. So, Mel, take it.
Okay, this is not my first COP. I have attended 3 in person, and this is the 3rd one that I've attended virtually. One of the things that's impressed me most about this COP has been the voices of the faith community speaking about the ethical and moral imperatives that we all face in dealing with the climate crisis. And B. Moorhead interviewed Corinna Gore, who is the daughter of Al Gore. And there's a wonderful video that's available to see them. But this morning in the World Council of Churches press conference was very impressive because they were tying together finance and action, and not just words, but what is being done, and making that all part of the faith component and the ethical responsibility that we all have to care for God's creation. So I think those are some of the most important outcomes that I've observed. Also, there's been some talk, not enough, about climate migration, because understand that climate migration is not officially recognized as a problem. It's not addressed by our government in any shape or form. Even the United Methodist Church talks about migration, but they don't put it in the context of climate migration. And so this is one thing we need to do, is to urge our church to speak out about climate migration, because these are people who are affected not just by heat, but by drought, by lack of water, by storms. There are multiple ways that people are forced into climate migration. And so these are some of the things that I've been listening for, as well as my other interest, which is methane. And so, Grace, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mel. Well, I was just able to be in the text group with Joan and Laura and Mel and Nate and Jonathan, and just as an observer, my focus was the youth participation. So the youth had 4 events, and just amazing to see people coming together globally, and the work that's been done in the last 12 months getting ready for this, and over the 6 continents, in several different schools and cities, that they've been rallying and listening to the kids and to the youth and who are coming. And there's a phrase that's been coming up among the indigenous community and the youth community, and the intersection of those two especially, which is don't talk about us without us. So there's very much a place, have a place at the table and be heard and have a voice. So that's I just thank Becca for this opportunity to join with the Board of Church and Society and Texas Impact.
So if we've got a couple more, a minute or so, we have been writing blogs. So and those blogs are being hosted by Texas Impact. Thank you to them. Becca and Mel are connected with Texas Impact. So you will see the blogs that we've written and others for Texas Impact. I put that link in the chat, and my conference, Cal Nevada, has a website, climate-cnumc.org, and there's a set of COP pages there where we've got links to the Texas Impact stuff as well, and some background on COP and things like that you can look at. If you're really interested in COP30, the United Nations web pages, there are things that you can watch. Not being an observer. That's the way that Grace has had to do it this year on the public side. So anybody can go and watch the public side. You can see all the press releases, and a few of the events are actually available to watch there. And then on the other side, we can see some of the events. There are still things that we cannot get into, even as virtual observers, that only people who were there can get into. So that's just a bit about it.
Wonderful.
And I will say that my previous experience with COP has been through Texas Impact. I've been a delegate from Texas Impact since 2019.
Yeah, be impressed. Texas Impact has just been doing some wonderful things. They have archives of previous COP videos, and you can kind of take a look if you're, depending on how much in the weeds you want to get, at the way this conversation has evolved and not evolved. Right, we're still stuck in some of the same places that we have been about, how do we address the harms, and how do we transition away from the harms? So
let me just say that one of the things that Texas Impact did was developed a study series of videos back in 2019 called The Path of Hope. The plan is, and Becca may want to talk about this, is to do a series for post-Lent this year, I think, isn't it? Becca, the new series that's being developed.
We're working on Lent. Yep.
For Lent, which will be a video study guide for churches.
That's fantastic. We are going to be transitioning in a minute to breakout rooms where there's going to be a lot more time to talk about this. We have a video from the bishops for you coming up, so don't miss out on that. But we do have, Becca has a prior commitment, so I just wanted to give an opportunity for her to say, is there anything that you want to share, having heard this conversation back and forth, and being sort of knee deep in it with the experience that you have? Is there anything that you wanted to share before we move to our bishop video?
Is there anything that I wanted to share? No, I think everyone did a great job talking, especially the caretakers. They have just been wonderful, and I know it's all volunteer effort, and and it's just so wonderful what they've been able to do, and I've really enjoyed reading their work. I did share a link in the chat for the YouTube video playlist for COP30 that Texas Impact has, and so that has lots of videos, and analysis and interviews and things like that if you want to go deeper into the subject. And just, yeah, keep watching our GBCS social media and Texas Impact social media, because we continue to write about COP long after it's over. And just thank you so much for having me.
We're glad
And-
you made it safely back.
That's right. And there are folks who are very generous with their time and experience. If you have a question that you want to follow up with, do that. Absolutely do that. And then there's a chance in just a few minutes to share with them directly. But we have something that happened that was pretty cool. So the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement penned a letter a couple of months ago to the Council of Bishops, urging them to take proactive action, to make proactive statements, to be involved in creation care in the United Methodist Church. And we got this wonderful response from the bishops recently. And Kathy is like, she just owns the chat with all her links. It is just fantastic, and I really appreciate that. So we tried to see if the bishop could join us today just to share that good news. And what we got is, sorry, it's last minute, but we'll send a video. So this video is a video from Bishop Dottie Escobedo Frank. And I'm going to turn it over to Kathy at this point to do any more introduction of the video that you might like to do, Kathy, but also just to play it so we can see.
Sure. I'll jump to playing it. Bishop Dottie is the bishop who leads the Bishop Council of Bishops Committee on Justice and Reconciliation. They were charged after our open letter came out with working with us to do a response, and also, as Dottie keeps saying to me, continue the work. I'm really thrilled that in their response there's a reference to the World Council of Churches, well, actually to partnerships, but to the idea of working with that decade of climate action. So she keeps saying we have a lot of work to do together, but this is the first step, is this response, and a quick video that I will play for you now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dottie Escobedo Frank. I am one of the bishops in the United Methodist Church, and I chair the Justice and Reconciliation team of the Council of Bishops. Last week, we came out of the Council of Bishops meeting, and together the Council of Bishops wrote a letter to the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. And it's a letter for all the United Methodists to see where we are at in supporting the movement to help us with creation care. So we want you to know that that letter is for you to read, and also that we are committed in the United Methodist Church to help all of our churches around the globe to be a part of finding different ways to care for God's earth. And we are committed to this work, to work alongside you and to be with you in this movement of being sure that we are in a sustainable planet and that we give the care that God asks us to give to the earth that we are a part of. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for being a part of making sure that we pay attention to loving and caring for our environment.
So you can see how we were very pleased to hear that, and I hope everyone heard the willingness of the bishops to be present and participatory in this work. That we don't know what that looks like yet. We do know that our church is full of beautiful words, as Kathy likes to say, beautiful words about the creation and the planet, but we also need to take beautiful action to see those words come to fruition, with everything from the gentle planting of seeds to the active wrestling of steering wheels. We've got to do that work. We're going to move to breakout rooms, but I want to give Audra and Jacob one more opportunity to just share what they're thinking before we move into our breakout rooms, having heard the conversation. Is there anything you want to add?
I don't think we have too much to add. We're really thankful for this robust conversation, and for the ways that each of us are contributing to this work. It's really wonderful to feel not alone in this, right? This is the point of these cafes, and we're appreciative of that. Nothing to add, though, beyond what we've shared. We're looking forward to more conversation in breakout rooms.
We are indeed not alone. We are not. And the work can feel really big. And you just do what comes next, right? And that's okay. And then the more that we're working on this bigger picture, the more that what comes next can be strategically aligned so that we together can move much more, make bigger steps. And I want to also give you a chance to say anything you wanted to say before we move to breakout rooms, anything we were reflecting on and wanted to mention.
No, I will just say I really enjoyed hearing how there are so many overlapping threads in much of the work we do, and it was wonderful to kind of virtually meet those of you who have spoken and hear the work that you're doing. It's very, very inspiring to me. And I really look forward to the breakout rooms and hearing more from folks I haven't heard from.
Yeah, we love the breakout rooms. It's really, there's everybody here is working in the middle of it. Everybody has stories and everybody has hopes and frustrations, right? Okay, let's just be honest about that one. United Methodism can be very frustrating to navigate, and yet look at the breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough. And so there is I'm very hopeful. I have definitely feel tremendous hope. So how we work breakout rooms here is that you get to choose which breakout room you go in. So Dawn is going to launch the breakout rooms. Dawn, who is awesome. There she is, awesome. And you get to select your room. Presenters, I do hope you'll select the room with your name on it. They do have names on it. And then we will return here to do a wrap up and a prayer. So go ahead and join your breakout room. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. I know y'all probably wanted more time. So we have just our closing time together now. I'm going to invite each of our presenters to share a little bit about anything that was left unsaid in the breakout room that they might want to share or a takeaway about how that went. So, Anne, I can see you, so I'll start with you there. How did it go? Is there anything you want to share coming out of that breakout room?
I will just say thank you to I was like mid-sentence. Thank you to the people in our breakout room. I think we spanned several time zones, and it was so wonderful to meet all of you. Our breakout room had a few questions, and we answered those around telling more stories of the resilience, whether it's use of solar panels or other uses of land, so that congregations and people could have more stories to pull from. And Kathy shared how that is something that is potentially already accessible in some form. And really good questions on how we do this work locally, how he move kind of World Council of Churches work into a local context. I will say I'm really inspired by the number of people here, and inspired, even though I haven't met all of you, inspired that this is something that you are passionate about and took an hour and a half of your day to focus on with us. And so I really appreciate, I'm really honored to be among you. And feel free to reach out if I'm of use in any way.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. I'm thrilled that you could be here myself. Just your work, my heart. Thank you. So Audra and Jacob, is there anything that you would like to say in following up from the breakout room?
Yeah. One thing is, as we were getting kicked out at the end, we were talking about forming green teams at churches and some of the challenges, and especially of at churches where you're trying to make part of the ministry more than just Sunday morning worship. And kind of the reminder that one, our social principles have very distinct sections in them regarding stewardship and creation care that we can always go back to, as well as the mandate from General Conference that each church should have a green team. That is a great resource, and I know Rashinda, you've put great work on the Creation Justice Movement website, sharing how you can find that information and how you can use it to help at your own churches.
And the last thing we'd like to share is we'd love to stay connected with anyone who would like to do this work. We mentioned, or Rashinda mentioned at the beginning, that we're also looking to build closer bonds within the North Central jurisdiction, especially that's some of our work, though, of course, we absolutely love to be connected in this global network. But specifically for those in the NCJ, we are looking to draw some closer connections over this next year. So we will put our email in the chat again. I'm not sure if it went to everyone or just to our breakout room, so we will do that again, and we'd love to be connected.
Thank you so much. And a big shout out to Chris Zinkowitz and Grace Pugh Hubbard, who have just done so much with Green Team organization as well. There's a lay stewardship class. There's information. So that toolkit, Kathy dropped in the link in there. It can get you a lot of places. There's also, I want to talk about the model resolutions. We're just currently editing model resolutions for your annual conference for 2026, and they will include things like forming a green team. You may need to edit it for your context. It might need to be simpler. Some of them are, based on making sure you have all the information you need, but it's all there. And if there's anything else you need as well, of course, just reach out. So that's fantastic. I want to turn quickly, just for another last couple of minutes, to our COP30 observer team. Now, Joan, I'm going to call you out specifically, but if there's someone else too that wants to, unfortunately, we don't have a ton of time for everybody, but if one or two of you would like to share, I would love that.
Well, at the end of the time, there was just an observation that we've been talking a lot about the youth at COP30, and somebody asked how we can get more youth on our green teams. We did not really have a chance to answer that question. I don't know whether anybody wants to speak to it at this point. We also had some good conversation about the absence of the United States at COP30, and perhaps the space that opened up for other things. But just to say that the US wasn't absent, the federal level was, but there were people there from cities and states, and also from various NDCs. So it wasn't like the US wasn't there. The US was definitely there and is committed to going ahead with the work. It's just we weren't there at the federal level. Mel, did you want to say anything about youth?
Well, I was going to say on the level that you were talking about, America was represented by the America is All In Pavilion in that group, headed by Gina McCarthy, the former executive director of the Environmental Protection Agency, along with Gavin Newsom and Pritzker and a number of others. There were over 100 state and local governmental officials who were at the COP, and that is where the work is going to take place going forward at the state and local level, as long as we have the current administration in place. And so it was important for them to be there, but it was also important for their voices to be heard. And also, I think one of the things coming out was the ethical implications of addressing the climate crisis and how we go about that, and the faith community's role in addressing these issues from a faith-based perspective.
Awesome. Absolutely. So I always wish we had more time. One of our things is to start on time and end on time, and we are at time. I might say that it sounds like for our Green Team Toolkit, to really maybe develop a couple of tools around standing with young people and maybe encouraging young people to have their teams. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to one of our wonderful co-host team members, Dawn Lewis, who is behind the scenes most of the time doing what she does, but she's going to offer our closing prayer, and any follow-up, check out your chat. Always reach out to folks if you need to. And Dawn, I'm going to turn it over to you to pray us out.
Thank you, Rashinda, and as always, it is so wonderful to see all these wonderful faces today. Thank you for being here. Okay, let us pray. God, we thank you for this opportunity to come together to hear from these climate justice leaders and learn about the important work they are engaged in. We ask that you grant strength and courage to those leaders at COP30 as they work to find common ground and just solutions on the climate front, and renew our commitment to care for the earth and one another so that our common home may be healed and restored for all of us for generations to come. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen and thank you. And thank you, everyone